Paul Volpe, the Fox. By nature, wary, watchful. On a routine meet to pick up a loan sharking debt.
Okay.
From seedy back alleys to the swankiest hotels, this is the Fox's town. Today, it won't be business as usual. Rivals plan a hit. He won't let this challenge to his turf go unanswered. Volpe will build a reputation as one of the underworld's most cunning and elusive gangsters. This despite a life caught in the spotlight. Paul Volpe has traveled a long road to reach success. He's a self-made mobster who plays by his own rules.
Listen, baby, I gotta step off for a little bit, okay? I know important. I just gotta go see an old friend. He called me on the phone. I haven't seen him in quite some time, okay? So I'm gonna go spend a little time with him, and I'll see you tonight, all right? Okay, honey, don't worry about it.
Paul Volpe was perhaps the first modern mafiosi. It made him talked about, it made him known, it made him a target in some circles. It certainly made him an unusual character in the underworld.
He was a very smart man. He was a strong, tough guy.
Paul Volpe was a man of power, very different to other people, but he very much marched to his own tune.
The name Volpe means fox, and if anything in his life, Paul Volpe was a fox. Clever as a fox, sometimes too clever.
Volpe can look back 30 years to a life that began at the bottom of Canada's poorest slum. Born in 1927 in the Ward, Toronto's immigrant ghetto, the boy will develop an uncanny instinct for survival, living on these streets.
From the turn of the century right through the 50s was a mix of new immigrants, Jewish immigrants, Italian immigrants, mostly poor, and a lot of characters and a lot of character. I mean, there was bootlegging places, there were Chinese whorehouses. He was born in a house that had rats crawling all over it. He used to tell a story to friends about his mother having to kill the rats in her own hands, squeeze the life out of him to protect her children. He was the seventh son of Elizabeth Volpe and his father, who had disappeared by the time he was a youngster. He never knew his father. But he was the seventh son of the seventh son, which, according to folklore, is the child of the devil.
A petty criminal by 20, he's preying on merchants within the Ward.
Come on, let's go. Hurry up, hurry up. Just up to the back. Come on, hurry up. In the corner, right there. Grab
No easy catch. Volpe will soon earn his nickname, the Fox.
Well, in Paul Volpe's early years, he was a hoodlum. He was a tough guy, willing to take chances, and this kind of thing gets noticed.
For 10 years, Volpe works the Ward streets, outwitting police, before finally being caught. After only a few months behind bars, Volpe is ready to look beyond the Ward. A hot new scam in Hamilton, muscling in on fraudulent stock promotions.
Hey, meat counter. How's your day going? Good?
I don't think this is a good idea anymore, Mr. Volpe.
Beg your pardon? Did I ask you what you think? Did I say ask you what you think?
It's just gotta stop.
It's gotta stop. We just started.
But he didn't realize that there were territories and that he was encroaching on Johnny Papalia's territory in Hamilton.
Underworld boss Johnny Papalia is a made member of the Mafia. No one works his territory without approval.
Johnny Papalia, who had grown up in the mob, was not too pleased with this, who's this Volpe guy coming down, you know, trying to get money.
Well, that wasn't too hard, no, was it? Give me a hard time again.
This is Hamilton, my town. This is mine. Get out of here.
For years a lone fox, Volpe now realizes that to succeed, he must find a place within the mob.
He saw that the mafia would open more doors for him, and he had made some connections with mafia people, and he actually went to people that he knew and said, how can I get into the mafia? And they told him how to do it, and he worked at it very hard. So he wisely went down to New York and he networked. He got to meet some people and introduced him to the top bosses of the Bonanno family. And Vito De Filippo became his mentor. He saw him as someone that could really be molded into a major criminal figure.
De Filippo teaches Volpe the rules and ancient customs of this secret society. An eager Volpe soaks it all in.
Paul Volpe saw the mafia as something that gave him opportunities, and I think it must have appealed to him, the idea of being in a group that has reach.
He went through a ceremony in 1961. He went through the burned piece of paper and swore an oath of silence.
At 34, Volpe is inducted into the Buffalo crime family of Stefano, the Undertaker Magaddino.
Well, being a made member of the mafia, formally initiated into the Magaddino family, made Paul Volpe a respected name on the street, period. You know, you don't mess with that guy. He can bring in people from Buffalo. This is a serious man.
I think being made in the Magaddino family, one thing it shows is this isn't a guy who's trying to be a big deal at one street corner in Toronto. This is a guy who's looking big.
The mystique of a made man comes with both privileges and obligations. De Filippo has a test for the new recruit. In late 1963, the mob sends this one-time kid from the ward south to the Caribbean.
I mean, the mob had a real hold in the Caribbean at that period. The 50s were the golden period for the mob in the early 60s in the Caribbean.
Haiti, paradise for a mob casino.
He went to Haiti because Vito De Filippo had connections there. The mob had connections with Duvalier, who was a very corrupt dictator. An ideal spot to run a casino.
Francois Papa Doc Duvalier, drug addict, and the island's supreme ruler.
He was a totally corrupt dictator. He had his secret police, the Tutomacoute, who would beat you and torture you.
Duvalier scared the hell out of them. Paul was telling me that when they had a meeting with Papa Doc Duvalier, he had a guy on each side of him pointing a machine gun at them. He said, and these guys looked like they were just hoping something might happen so they could blast away.
Paul Volpe said to a number of close friends the only person he was ever scared of in his life was Papa Doc Duvalier.
With little room to maneuver, the Fox must convince this unpredictable dictator of his worth. Paul Volpe's first assignment for the mob: strike a deal for a casino with one of the world's most notorious dictators. A good old-fashioned bribe, just a taste of promised riches for Haiti's Papa Doc Duvalier.
Hi.
I think with Paul Volpe going to Haiti, I think that's absolutely fascinating. You know, it shows he's spinning the globe and just looking for opportunities, really.
He and Vito DeFilippo set up a casino called the Intercontinental. At that time, it was the only casino.
Paul Volpe, host of the International Casino, revels in his new role.
I mean, there were pictures of him at the casinos. I mean, he's right there, enjoying the table.
There were these gangsters and high rollers coming in and out. He was making money. It was fun.
I think there must have been something in gambling that it hit something pretty deep in him. You get it set up, you have the right people corrupted, and then it just runs itself, and it's semi-legitimate and, you know, semi-respectable.
Paul Volpe was even featured in tourism ads at the time, in the 60s. Come down to Haiti and enjoy the casinos.
Tourists and gangsters alike visit the island in droves. Most are stunned by the casino's crooked roulette wheels and marked decks. The money is rolling in.
He was always a little bit frightened down there, but it was very exciting. And the only way that casino worked was to give a lot of money to the dictator, Papa Doc Duvalier.
We're all together. Nice.
Duvalier wanted a piece of the place. Then Duvalier wanted a little bigger piece of the place.
He had to give money to the Nano family, he had to give money to Duvalier. He didn't end up making a lot of money for himself. So business really dried up for Paul Volpe.
Despite the casino's success, Volpe's cut shrinks with the increasing greed of his partners. It's time to move on. The casino adventure reveals the disadvantages of mob membership. Kicking up tribute to his mob bosses have left him little.
One of the things that people don't understand about Paul Volpe is that he was a soldier in the Magadino family. He wasn't a capo, and he didn't have other Italians under him and kicking money up to him. There was no pyramid with Paul Volpe at the top. Paul Volpe was a soldier.
Like any good soldier, Volpe is on the front lines when the mob faces an unprecedented assault.
Not since underworld boss Joe Valachi testified before a U.S. Senate committee in 1963 has the mafia's tradition of omertà, the code of silence, been broken in such a major way.
The U.S. Senate's investigation into organized crime exposes the top families of the underworld. All its connections throughout North America revealed.
The Buffalo family?
That's Buffalo and Canada's all one.
All one.
When I say Canada, I should tell you I mean Toronto.
Yeah, the first time Paul Volpe really popped up as being connected with organized crime, he was just on a huge stage.
Part of the exhibits were the structure of the Magadino crime family in Buffalo. And listed under the Canadian members of the Magadino crime family in Buffalo were Paul Volpe, living in Toronto.
Being named at the hearings is not all bad. Ironically, it is official confirmation of Volpe's position in the underworld. Extorting shady stock promoters just got a whole lot easier.
We're on a street scene, you want to back out of this deal, is that what I heard?
No.
Paul knew Dick Angle. He was a stock broker in the old sense of the word. You know, where things weren't done according to Hoyle, if you will. And
you gonna sign this?
Paul was a very charming man if You were on the good side of him.
You understand what I'm saying?
Volpe scares Angle right into the arms of police, who have been shadowing the Fox since the Valachi hearings.
Dick Angle was wired, and then they had these tapes which were really quite chilling. Blood will run in the streets and talk like that, which sounded like extortion.
Okay, put your hands behind your back.
Oh, look at you. Look at you. You stool pigeon prick. Look at you. Humpty Dumpty.
Why not?
Me and Humpty Dumpty.
We got you.
Struggled incredibly not to go to jail in between 65 and 68. Everything from bribing jurors to threatening people to trying to bribe the Crown Attorney in the case. He did everything not to go to jail, but he had to go, so he took it like a man.
On June 21st, 1968, Volpe begins a 2-year sentence for extortion. Plenty of time to ponder his life in the mob.
While Volpe was technically a member of the Magadina family, he wasn't really a member of the Buffalo mob. I mean, they basically sponsored him into the mob, but he didn't run businesses for Buffalo.
Buffalo has little influence over Toronto or Volpe. An opening for the Fox, and a plan to add a unique twist to organized crime in Toronto.
He recognized the need in the underworld, and he had the guts and the balls to make a move, and he made the move.
Upon his release, the Fox will go back to the streets, where he will assemble a homegrown organization.
To really run a gang, you know, you needed a group of people doing things, break-and-enters, extortions, loan sharking. And he spent the early part of 69 and 70 building this great multicultural Canadian mob.
He knew these people from a young age, so these are guys that were friends and grew up together, and of course there's a trust and you know a faith to each other there.
Gentlemen.
This crew has no made men, no blood relations, or secret oaths. Instead, a team of experts with one thing in common: the drive to make money.
Okay. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Paul Volpe was a very charismatic man. In a room of 150 people, you would notice him first. People gravitated towards him, and the charm that drew the criminals towards him and his crew, which is really what it wasn't a mafia, it was a crew, it was a gang. The very same thing that brought them to him also brought victims to him.
Got some product for you, boss.
What do you got? Let's see what you got, Rosie. All right. Beautiful. Good job. Hey.
By 1971, Volpe's gang runs huge gambling, extortion, and loan sharking operations in the city.
Beautiful. Good job, Rosie. I'm happy for you.
He was good to them. And he saw to it that they all made a nice living. And they were all very loyal to him.
Good. Beautiful.
All these guys that he had around him, everybody looked at him as being the king.
Volpe flaunts his success. He marries Danish model Lisa Dalholt, and the couple settles into an estate north of the city.
It's amazing!
He names it Fox Hill.
He had a very close relationship with his wife. His wife was a Danish immigrant who was a model, a very attractive woman, who I believe had no knowledge at all of who Paul was.
A lot of gangsters like to be unpretentious and live a low-key life so they don't draw attention to themselves. Volpe was just the opposite. So he loved driving expensive cars, having big mansions.
Volpe's growing influence throughout the city has caught the attention of a powerful but troubled industry, one that will find his connections to be quite useful. In a few short years, Paul Volpe has created his own style of mob family and a great deal of wealth.
Although he projected this image of being a mafia guy and of being very rich, he had this affectionate regard for the house that he was born in. It's the only house left on the street, but he, just out of nostalgia, kept it there. Empty, but there.
A testament to his influence, Volpe has saved his childhood home from the wrecker's ball of a changing city. By the early 1970s, Toronto's skyline is changing. Developers are getting rich, but the unions want their peace, threatening to bring it all to a standstill with strikes.
Builders didn't want to pay higher wages. It was always low cost, low, so we can make a profit. And at that point in time, they approached Volpe, who said, well, I can do something for you. I can maybe get the men back to work.
Well, he had a strong tie to the Drywallers and Carpenters Union, and that gave him a lot of power to do things for builders. And he did. And he got things done.
Volpe sees an opportunity to provide special services to the city's builders.
Paul Volpe was very capable of turning up on job sites if there was trouble in the industry. He said, look, I'm a labor consultant. I can bring peace for you for a price.
Appreciate you coming down.
Oh, yeah, take care of everything for you, okay? Nothing to worry about. I'm gonna do it my way.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand.
Okay.
Paul Volpe was able to convince people, builders, developers, that he was able to ensure that they would have all of the workers that they needed when they needed them, and that there would be no strike.
He was able to fix things for construction bosses and union bosses, and he would get money from both sides, payoffs. And if there was any problem that couldn't be fixed, he brought in part of his crew, and he arranged for bombs to go off in various construction sites. And that would usually solve the problem.
Not everybody went along with Paul Volpe. There was a lot of violence in the industry. There were some arsons, there were beatings, there was woundings of shootings of some union people. And at that point, of course, it becomes a public disturbance, and it cannot be ignored even by corrupted politicians or corrupted union leaders.
There was a big uproar in the legislature when one of the NDP leader, Morton Schulman, stood up and said that there was a phony union with mafia connections. And you can't turn a blind eye at this point once mafia has been named in the legislature.
In 1974, a Royal Commission inquiry uncovers what it calls a sinister array of characters operating within the construction industry.
It was a bombshell, you know. Front page of all the newspapers were all these big construction people and unions. And the mob, Paul Volpe was stage center.
The Commission's findings force Volpe to back off. But the police have been alerted and are on the hunt.
My main interest was an individual with the name of Paul Volpe. He was the central figure that I started out working on. And before very long, we got a project going on him.
Hey, Nat.
Frustrated at their inability to snare such a high-profile gangster, police try to compromise Volpe's right-hand man.
Step into the car, please.
Nady Kligerman mainly ran the loan shark operation, so it was very difficult. Unless you could get Kligerman to say where the money was really ending up, it was very difficult to get to Volpe.
Kligerman is offered $200,000 to sell out his boss.
I recognized that it wasn't going to happen, because if Kligerman had gone against Volpe, he would have been dead as quick as it could possibly happen. And we found out many different things that Mr. Volpe was involved in, and we continued different investigations. Basically, he was insulated enough that he was difficult to charge.
Kligerman has tipped Volpe about this offer. Looking for an upper hand in the chase, Volpe catches his police shadows off guard.
You're gonna catch me? You catch me fair and square.
The one thing that Volpe said to me, he said, if you put me in jail legally, for 20 years, I'll shake your hand when I'm going to jail. He said, but if you put 10 pounds of heroin in the trunk of my car and set me up, he said, I'll come after you.
Volpe has left quite an impression.
Take care of that.
And his bill. He will be more cautious than ever, knowing the police are starting to close in.
Paul would always carry quarters. He'd have a roll of quarters. Because he'd always make phone calls. He'd go to phone number 1, he'd make a phone call. And then he'd go to phone number 2, and he'd work up and down. And he figured that if he did that, there was no way he could be wiretapped.
The police did saturation coverage of him. The OPP, the Toronto Police, Metro as it was called then, and the RCP were all running operations on Volpe. Incredible, complicated operations.
I mean, we tried to gather intelligence, but he made a complete fool of us. He knew everything that went on. I mean, it was incredible.
Volpe lives by his instincts. He senses a weak link within his ranks.
Ian Rosenberg was young, impulsive, very good at dynamiting places, but not very trustworthy. He was thought by a number of people in the Volpe group to have cooperated with the police. It's unclear, actually, how much he actually did cooperate.
I mean, when I heard that that Ian was murdered, I'm thinking, well, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, and there's a perfect example. I mean, this was a tough guy, and obviously he became a liability.
A clean hit with no ties to Volpe and his gang. But for a team of investigative journalists, Volpe's connections are clear. In 1977, they plan an extensive television expose on the mob in Canada.
I got a call from a member of the press who wanted to discuss with me my client, Paul Volpe. But I said, why do you want to speak to me? Why don't you speak to Paul himself?
Hello. Yeah, it's Paul Volpe. BBC.
In a surprise move, Volpe welcomes the press to his home. He's confident he can outfox them. A successful businessman with nothing to hide.
Well, yeah, okay, go ahead. You come on down and let me talk to you in person. That always works better for me, all right? Okay, I'll be waiting for you.
He just needs to turn on a little of that Volpe charm.
Yeah, mafia. It's like a unicorn, you know, everybody talks about them. You ever see one? I'll tell you the biggest bullshitters around, the RCMP. The RCMP, they got more power than God. You gotta expose them. Look what they're doing. They come here, plant these wires in my house. What for? What did I do? Nothing. The police, they talk about organized crime, but they don't talk about the politicians. They're the biggest crooks around. Hey, I'm just trying to protect myself. You know, an informer, all he's doing is trying to hurt people. So you gotta kill him. You gotta get him out of the way. Look, cameraman, look, take a shot of that beautiful house I built for me and my wife. Look, hard-working son of an immigrant came into this country with nothing. And look at what we did with hard work. The mafia, get mafia.
The most important thing out of all that is Volpe began to think that this naive reporter believed him, that he wasn't really a mob boss.
You know what? It's getting a little cold outside. What do you say we go inside, we'll get you a coffee? Okay. Hey, come on. I'll take you inside for a coffee. My wife make us a nice espresso.
I think Paul enjoyed the publicity. He complained about how he was harassed by the press and the police and everything else, but I think he quite enjoyed it.
Volpe watches his plan unfold.
I'll tell you the biggest bullshitters around, the RCMP.
The country is spellbound by Connections, a CBC investigation of the mafia in Canada. It has completely backfired.
Hey, I'm just trying to protect myself. You know, an informer, all he's doing is trying to hurt people. So you gotta kill him. You gotta get him out of the way.
There you are. I mean, quite clear what you are on television. So he would be highly offended by that program. Probably one of the worst things that ever happened to him.
He didn't make any fans out of the mob guys from that show. He looked very bad on that show, and he knew it.
3 million Canadian viewers agree. This terrible miscalculation forces the Fox to lay low. Toronto's too hot. It's time to move on. Atlantic City. Gambling has just been legalized. A building boom is on the horizon. A chance for Volpe to work his old scams in a new town.
Organized crime is not welcome in Atlantic City. And I warn them again, keep your filthy hands out of Atlantic City. Keep the hell out of our state.
Construction, casinos, and a dare. A tempting challenge for the Fox. Atlantic City in the 1970s is poised for rebirth. Newly legalized gambling will make it a hotspot for the mob. Paul Volpe, feeling pressure in Toronto, sets his sights in a town the mob is declared open.
Basically what that means is that other organized crime families can operate in Atlantic City, and they're supposed to be touching base with the local organized crime family so they know they're in town and what they're doing.
The city is under the control of Angelo the Gentle Don Bruno, and Volpe, respecting mob protocol, seeks him out.
He went down to see Angelo Bruno and everyone who ran the Philadelphia and Atlantic City mob, and he gave his okay. There was no problem.
Paul Volpe's, I guess, initiative was not to take over a casino. The idea is to own everything around the casino. So you want to own the land, because that's where the real money is.
Volpe gets busy, buying and selling properties, raking in easy profits.
They take illegal money, buy up real estate. The real estate escalates, they put buildings on it, get permits, and then sell it off and launder the money. It's always been a good way to take illegal money, put it into something like real estate, which usually increases in value. There's very little scrutiny with law enforcement on who's buying what piece of property.
The amounts of money vary. Some people are saying there were millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. There certainly was a limitless revenue stream.
News of Volpe's success begins to spread. He's an excellent contact for mobsters looking to launder money through the growing town.
We got some money, but we got to get it out.
Okay.
We need an easy outlet. That's why I'm coming to you.
How much are we talking about?
5, 6.
100 million?
No, million.
I'll give you the easiest outlet. Send it to me in AC. I tell you, there's no better place right now. That's tops.
The mob is making so much money, a turf war erupts. Greed and ambition take hold. Angelo Bruno will have no chance to calm the situation.
Frequently what happens in mafia families is that there are aspiring younger people who don't like the boss, and the only way you can change the boss is to have him killed.
The Gentle Don is murdered by his underboss on March 12th, 1980.
This was the most respected Don in Atlantic City and in southern New Jersey, just brutally murdered. What ensued from that, there were over 100 people killed in the battle for New Jersey and Atlantic City that was unleashed by Scarfo when he took out Bruno. And whatever deal Volpe had with Bruno didn't hold.
The new Don's first act is to demand tribute from anyone working Atlantic City. and this includes Paul Volpe.
And then some Atlantic City guys got a hold of him and said, if you're going to operate here, you have to include us. And he told them to buzz off. He used different words, but he told them to buzz off.
One good informant told me that he liked to eat alone, which means that he didn't want to share any of his profits.
Refusing to kick up a penny, Volpe decides to move on. It's been a good run. He's made millions. It's time to enjoy the spoils. In 1980, Volpe returns to Toronto a changed man. He has lost interest in the street and his old gang.
He was living the good life, but he kind of lost touch with the street. You know, he was still collecting money from the unions and still collecting money from the street, and some of those people didn't see why the money should be going to Paul Volpe. He was nowhere around, he wasn't doing anything for it. He was trying to remove himself from the nitty-gritty of the daily mob stuff. He stopped running street operations, loan sharking, extortion. He was almost solely involved in land deals. But at this point, he didn't have much of a street gang, and he didn't have a lot of muscle left. Nate Clegman was on the lam. Chuck Yano was in jail.
There were guys in there who were great guys and great crooks and really colorful characters. But really, the loyalty was artificial. It was nothing like the loyalty of a real mafia, where you're of the blood. Paul Volpe changed. Paul Volpe wanted to be more respectable, at least in appearance. And when you do that, you basically ended your life of crime.
Paul Volpe is now at a crossroads, unsure of where he stands.
He had managed to upset people in Philadelphia, in Buffalo, in New York, in his own family. I mean, he had everybody mad at him.
In Toronto in the early 80s, new groups of criminals with power were rising.
I got it!
And the people that were in power at the time didn't want to accept it. He didn't size up the situation correctly, Mr. Volpe.
We're here to see Mr. Volpe.
Well, we're sitting down where his wife couldn't hear what we were saying. And when we said there's a contract out, he said, who would want to kill me? I'm not into any of this stuff.
He said, look, Paul, this is serious. They want to kill you. They put a contract on you, and would you help us fake your hit? They simply asked Volpe for his cooperation.
In a stunning move, Volpe agrees to go along with the police. He knows that the hitman will need proof that the job is done.
Surprisingly, he went to his room, got his wallet, and gave it to Mark Murphy. And said, you can give this to the hitman that he killed me. Most of these mafia guys are master manipulators, and Paul Volpe was that. He was probably seeing it as a good way of getting rid of some of the people he had fallen out with.
Volpe was confident enough and smart enough that he could play a lot of different people, and he wouldn't mind trying to work with even police.
As police stage the hit, Volpe and his wife hide out at RCMP headquarters. Within 24 hours, they charge 2 rival mobsters with attempted murder. Volpe has gone against his own.
It's the family things, eh? He went against, their code, their omerta, right? I mean, he conspired with the police to ensnare his own.
A people of honor or respect set the accounts themselves. Never would cooperate with police.
He cooperated with police investigations, all while maintaining his position as being a mafia boss. In the macho milieu of the mob, I mean, this was unheard of, scandalous behavior.
Volpe has turned his back on the mob. He will have little warning if they choose to strike.
Well, the word got out in the street, but that Paul was a rat. That's what got out in the street. And guys figured that Paul maybe was operating for a long time because he was a Fink. And that was very heavy on the street.
The street, where Volpe swore a lifelong allegiance to the Mafia code. His betrayal can never be forgiven.
These three men were clearly planning something. They met in secret, they had a huddled conversation, and then shortly afterwards, a flurry of phone calls went out. One phone call goes to Montreal, one phone call goes to New York City, and from there a call was immediately placed to Italy.
In 20 minutes, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice, okay? You better be on time. Sounds good. Okay. Ciao. Listen, baby, I gotta step up for a little bit, okay?
Where are you going?
I know important. I just gotta go see an old friend. He called me on the phone. I haven't seen him in quite some time, okay? So I'm gonna go spend a little time with him, and I'll see you tonight, all right? Okay. Okay, honey, don't worry about a thing.
The police keep watch over Volpe. Both know Mafia contracts are seldom withdrawn.
Guys, you gotta move your car.
You sure it's a good idea to go out today, Mr. Volpe?
Listen, I understand that you're concerned. Just worry about my wife, Lisa, okay? Move the car.
Keep an eye on her.
People were after Volpe his entire life. I mean, from the beginning, he was a poor Italian being abused by the WASP establishment. It's true, there was a lot of racism against Italians in the 40s. In the 50s, he had problems with Papalia, he had problems with the police. In the 60s, he had all these police operations against him, the extortion, with 5 trials. The 70s, he had all 3 police forces running major operations against him. With all the problems he had all the time, he managed to carry on 30 years as a criminal, still make money, and stay alive.
I spoke to Lisa, and she pointed out that Paul was to be home at 9 o'clock the night before, and he never arrived. And I said, well, maybe he's at a party. No, Mr. Humphrey, I know Paul. When he says he's going to be home at 9, he'd be home at 9. And he hasn't shown up, and I'm very concerned.
It was tough. Like I say, you know, he's sort of a friend, and it was tough to see him get killed. You know, bad a guy as he was, I mean, you see, like I say, you couldn't help but like him. And he was sort of a friend that got killed, as far as I was concerned, and it was tough. And I was sort of shocked to hear it happen, you know. Even though you knew it was coming, it was still a shock.
Paul Volpe, the Fox, rose from obscurity to infamy, a mob boss who lost sight of the underworld streets that were the source of his power. In the end, he would betray the Mafia's most basic rules of loyalty and silence. To this day, his murder remains unsolved.